I would now like to invite the President and Managing Director of Applied Materials India, Srinivas Satya, onto the stage. Srinivas is the President and Managing Director of Applied Materials India Private Limited. He is also the Vice President of Business Development and Strategy for Applied Materials. Now, as Head of Applied Materials India, Satya manages the performance, strategy and development of the company in the region. He oversees business and advocacy, many other roles. And as Head of Business Development, he drives the inorganic growth through investments, partnerships and acquisitions. Time now, without any further ado, to invite Srinivas Satya to moderate this panel. Take it ahead.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to moderate this panel on propelling the Make in India engine, and we'll focus on three specific enablers for that. But before we do that, I want to invite the panelists onto the stage. As Ms. Vasanthi mentioned, we have excellent representation from some of the key states who are very active in this program. So it's my honor to invite the panelists onto the stage. Shri Jayesh Ranjan, IAS Secretary, Information Technology from Government of Telangana. And next we invite Shri Pradeep Jena, IAS Principal Secretary, Electronics and IT Department from Government of Odisha. Finally, on behalf of the Government of Kerala, the IT and Industries Department, we have a person who, from the entrepreneurial side of what we are going to talk about, Dr. Jayesh Prasad, who is the CEO for the Kerala Startup Mission. So I invite him onto the stage. Thank you very much. So what we'll do is we have about 50-55 minutes or so. I'll spend just a few minutes to set the stage with a few key slides. Then we'll open it up. We'll spend the majority of time hearing from the panelists here. Each of them will make a few opening comments. And then the last 30 minutes or so we'll spend with a few of the questions that I had. We'll also try to reserve some time for questions from the audience. So, we are here to talk about Make in India and we are here to talk about Make in India and specifically in the high value manufacturing. Especially, we are all here talking about the electronics and semiconductor ecosystem. The Make in India program, which kind of got kicked off in 15-16 months back, has had quite a bit of initial success both here as well as globally. But clearly a lot more needs to be done. While there's been good progress, I think some of the initial changes or progress has not quite been what at least the folks from industry and others have really wanted. So in our mind, there are three key enablers that we really need to see this get accelerated, which is the high value manufacturing, we need the skilled workforce, and finally we need some entrepreneurship in the hardware sector itself. We certainly have the foundation for these three pillars. If you see at the bottom of this, the domestic demand has been there, is there, and despite some of the global uncertainties we hear of, at least from an India demand perspective for electronics and semiconductors, that's definitely there, the 400 billion number that we hear. So we do have the foundation for this. We have the key stakeholders, the industry, the government, and the academia, right? They've all been active in looking at this one. So while there is more that needs to happen with each of these stakeholders, they've certainly been a very active participant to make this engine go forward. And what they're all doing is, putting together the right policies and the infrastructure. So in our view, with the foundational elements in place and strengthening with active push from all the stakeholders, with these three enablers that we laid out here, we will see the vision for this Make in India for our electronics and semiconductor segment materialize. But then we really need to look at each of these pillars to see what is working and what the key gaps are. So I'll spend one slide each on each of these three pillars that you see here. If you look at the manufacturing itself, we have these aggressive goals of manufacturing to contribute a quarter of our GDP by the next 7-8 years. A quarter of our GDP roughly means about, to grow from where we are today, you are at 13% or so to have an additional 12%, we have to add about 400, 500 billion from the manufacturing segment itself, right? And these are pretty big numbers. And for us to be able to hit that, we have to have the high value manufacturing, right? And by high value manufacturing, what we mean is the activity which really has the margins in it, which demonstrates the high profitability, which also spurs the ecosystem, right? It has a certain supply chain associated with it, it has a certain R&D and research associated with it, and it's also something which strengthens the strategic plans of the nation itself. So it should be of high strategic importance. So if these three criteria are met in terms of profitability, enabling an ecosystem and strengthening our country's strategic plans, then we think that's a high value manufacturing for us. And we certainly need this. And right now it certainly needs a boost if you look at what has been happening and where the gaps have been. So we'll be eager to hear from the panelists on what their views are on to make this happen. So moving on, the second pillar was really about the skilled workforce. We know that if manufacturing has to hit a quarter of our GDP, the jobs will come. It's expected that it will create about an additional 100 million jobs in the country. But the key thing to understand is what are the kind of jobs that will be created and are we ready for it? If you look at what other nations have done, the East Asian nations, which in the last 20, 30 years, they have planned for this before actually the manufacturing and the maturity happened. So it behooves on all of us here to really think about, are we ready with this kind of manpower? What are the skills that are needed? Do they have the right kind of education? Do they have the vocational training? How can they really be productive? To compete in the world, how do you have the labor productivity with this workforce? So I think we have a challenge here that needs to be tackled as well, so that we are ready when this manufacturing really kicks off. Finally, if you look at the third pillar, the entrepreneurship in this space, there's been a lot of buzz on startups in India with several events in there, and I think it has overtaken Israel recently. We are now third in the world in terms of the overall startup ecosystem behind US and UK. But if you look at and you see some of the numbers here on how much funding has gone into it and what the growth has been. But if you look at where the startup, what space they are in, a majority of it are in the e-commerce and those spaces. We need those as well. There's nothing wrong with those. Those are really making our life remarkably different. But if you look at the far right of it, the number of startups in the hardware manufacturing ecosystem has been really paltry. So this is one of the pillars where we are clearly behind when we look at it from the ESA point of view. So just to summarize this, we need the high value manufacturing, needs a kick and a boost for that. We need the right kind of skilled workforce. And finally, the entrepreneurship and the startup ecosystem in this space needs to kickstart as well. And each of these stakeholders, the industry, government, and the academia, have a role to play in it. Right? The industry has to think long term. It's not just about a 2 to 3 year return or hitting cash flows right away off the start. The industry has to think long term and invest in the right kind of R&D for this. And the government still has to push along in the ease of doing business. That is one area which kind of stands out as where we are still not really doing well in the last 14, 15 months. And the academia has a big role to play in training the workforce that we have. So with this as the background, let me transition over to our panelists. I'll request each of them to make a few opening comments, and then we'll go to the questions itself. So first I want to invite Sri Jayesh Ranjan from Government of Telangana to make a few opening comments.
Thank you very much, Srinivas. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Many of you would be aware that while national campaigns like Make in India, Digital India, Startup India, Skill India, all that is happening. But the real action today is in the states. And of the 29 states in the country, you can maybe count 8 to 10 states as being in the forefront of these kind of programs. And of course, some of us are here. A few more are there who are not on the dais, but we need to recognize them as well. So these are the 8 to 10 states which are really pushing the boundaries, and each of the state offers something very innovative, very unique. I would like to share with you that Telangana, which is the 29th and the newest state in the country, values electronic manufacturing, electronic design as a very, very key priority area in our overall economic development plans. And our policies, our approach, our action on the ground in the last year and a half has really given us some very, very encouraging initial results. And I'll very quickly share what we have done, and then if there are any specific issues that you would like to clarify or you want to seek more information about, I'll be very happy to address that. Now, electronic manufacturing is focused around Hyderabad, which is the capital city of Telangana, the jewel in our crown, so to say. The electronic manufacturing park, the clusters, is more than 1,000 acres, and I'm very happy to inform that the electronic manufacturing cluster is practically a part of Hyderabad city. You step off the airport and you enter into the electronic manufacturing park. This is something which is of very unique advantage which Hyderabad can offer, because if you try to locate your manufacturing elsewhere, for instance, any other state, typically you are shown locations or parks which are 100 kilometers away from the city, 500 kilometers away from the city, and so on. So the advantage of Hyderabad is that you can locate your manufacturing practically within the city, and obviously it means that all your executives, your employees, they can live in a very livable city. Hyderabad, many of you would be aware, has been consistently rated as the best city to live in terms of quality of living, and Mercer does this annual ranking of Indian cities. So for the last 3 years, Hyderabad is rated number 1. Not to run down any other city, but there are obvious advantages of good quality infrastructure and at a very, very reasonable price. I mean, since we are in Bangalore, I can always use this as a comparison that you can get thrice the infrastructure of Bangalore in Hyderabad at 1/3 the prices. So, but again, as I said, it doesn't mean that I'm trying to run down Bangalore, but that is how the reality is. The other important point is that Srinivas mentioned about ease of doing business. I would like to share with you that Telangana today is the only state in the country which has done away with the requirement of prior permissions and approvals. You do not need any approvals, any permissions to start your business. Other states are still talking about simplifying their procedures, making it online, monitoring it closely, putting some nodal officer. But we as a state have done something very kind of unbelievable, which is to do away with the requirements of permission. You don't need anyone's permission. You just apply for a piece of land, give a self-certificate that you will comply with all the laws of the land, and you just start your construction from the very next day onwards. So this is something which again is very unique, and I must tell you that in the last year and a half, close to 1,000 plus approvals have been given in all across sectors, not just in electronic manufacturing, but the entire range of industrial manufacturing. 1,030 approvals have been given till yesterday following this principle of no prior approval required. Self-certification is enough, and when you start commercial production, only then you need approvals, which also will be delivered to you in a 15-day period. And if you fail to deliver it on the 15th day, then on the 16th day it is deemed to be approved, and the person who is responsible for delaying your approvals is actually penalized for the number of days he has delayed it. Every day he is penalized 1,000 rupees, and that is given to you. So basically what I want to say is that giving 1,000 rupees is no big deal. I mean, it's peanuts, but it sets very high levels of accountability. See, there is no state government today which says that if I default, I give you a right to sue me, which we do. And this is something which is a part of our legislation. It is not a government order which can be tomorrow overturned or thrown away. So in fact, the very first act which the new government of Telangana passed in their assembly was this act. which is called TS IPAS. Since skilling is another theme of this panel, I would again like to introduce something very unique which happens in Telangana. We have created an institution which is called the Telangana Academy for Skills and Knowledge, TASK, TASK. What TASK does is that it empanels engineering colleges, and we all know that while engineering colleges are good in the country, but they are still not very up to date with emerging technologies, new technologies. So what TASK does is to find out what are the emerging technologies in the market and introduces those as an add-on curriculum in these engineering colleges. So for instance, I was in a seminar yesterday here in Bangalore organized by IBM. So I learned to my pleasant surprise that Telangana is the only state where in an organized way IBM's Blue Mix is taught in the colleges, and it is done through TASK. So many of these next generation emerging technologies or any other kind of skill set which you think the colleges don't really emphasize that much, we run add-on courses completely at our own cost. So suppose as an employer, you want 100 people with some particular skill set, we will train 500 people and ask you to select the best 100 of them. And you can take complete control of this training program. Your resource persons can come, you can manage how this training is happening. So under complete quality assurance, the best talented people. So you don't really need to retrain them or waste time and energy and effort in kind of skilling them again. And since the third pillar is on entrepreneurship, I would again like to share something which is very, very innovative. See, because Telangana is the newest state in the country, we take pride in calling ourselves the startup state. And I'm very happy to share with you that the largest technology incubator in the country is today located in Hyderabad, which is called the T-Hub. It has been launched 3 months ago, and the kind of buzz it has created, it has become a role model today for the rest of the country. People say that what exists in Valley or what exists in Cambridge, or what exists in Israel or Singapore or Barcelona cannot be recreated anywhere. And many attempts have been made in the past to recreate these kind of ecosystems without any success. But we have put together something so meticulous that lots of Valley visitors are coming to us, and even their eyes pop out when they see what we have put on ground. So I agree with Srinivas that focus on electronic or hardware innovation is still to catch up. But through T-Hub, that is going to be our focus, and by the end of this year, a vertical of T-Hub which focuses on hardware will be very much up and running in Hyderabad. So I do agree that states still need to kind of do a lot to meet industry's expectations. But I'm very, very confident that what we are doing in Telangana is going to set the benchmarks for the future. And I'll be very happy to take your questions and suggestions and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Next I invite Shri Pradeep Jena from Government of Odisha to share a few words.
Thank you, Srinivas. I think Srinivas has, in his opening remarks, has placed all the issues in right context. And the Make in India program, which the national government has launched, whether it is Make in India, Digital India, Startup India, it's a very noble intention. But converting the noble intention into action is really a big challenge for the whole of the country. And as Jayesh has told, it is the states who have to convert this intention into action. And he has rightly said that not all the states are in equal position to contribute to this process. And few states are already a little ahead, and few states have joined the race. So Odisha is one of the states which has also joined the race, and last 2-3 years we have started working on this line, and we have utilized the services of India Electronics and Semiconductor Association to help us preparing the roadmap for electronics and semiconductor manufacturing sector. Accordingly, we also created a Department of Electronics and IT, to give little focus to electronics. We have changed the name of the department, and from 1st of April we are also creating a Directorate of Electronics and Communication in the state. We exclusively deal with the electronics sector. As Jayesh has already told out, all the states who are keen to join the race have something to offer, and then sometimes we compete with each other. That's a good thing. At least now states are joining the race and trying very hard to grab a portion of this cake and start getting some industries for two reasons: to help the state contributing to the Make in India effort, and second aspect is to create more of job employment for its people. So I will talk something about what Odisha is doing. Till recently, we as a state, we control 1/3 of the country's mineral resource, so more of our effort was towards metallurgical and mineral based industries. Apart from that, in software technology, things, we have done something reasonably good. But in electronic sector, we had not done so well, and maybe we are a late startup, and we want to catch up with the rest of the early starters very aggressively. So what we are trying to do is that, yes, it's a big challenge. The three challenges which Srinivas has spelled out: high value manufacturing, skilled workforce, and innovative entrepreneurs. See, we have to create an ecosystem, and ecosystem would require the intention of the state governments in the form of policy legislations, and then creating appropriate institutional setups to implement those policy intentions. And like he said, that Telangana has a system where no approval is required for setting up industries. Yes, Telangana perhaps is one of the early starters. Then many states are thinking in this line, and in ease of doing business, Odisha has done fairly well. Now we are 7th, but next 4 months we hope to come within the top 3, and accordingly a whole lot of reforms we have initiated. As you said that they have an act, we also have an act that is called Industry Facilitation Act, where very strong accountability are fixed, and whatever commitments are there, if those commitments are not fulfilled within those specified period, deemed approvals are available, and very strong penalty systems are also there in the bureaucracy to so results. That's something which we are doing. This apart, the biggest challenge is, do we have a sufficient manpower pool to contribute to this endeavor? Do we have sufficiently quality trained manpower in the country? So in our state of Odisha, so states have to possibly work very hard to create pool of quality manpower, not only to bridge this gap, but many of the graduates and diplomas that we produce, or ITI technicians that we produce in this country, maybe 70, 80, 90% of them are not useful to the industries from the day one. So therefore, creating a skilled manpower pool has been on our radar, and we have come up with one is we have already a set of jump. When I say that I don't jump there, but they are not readily useful, so we have to build their skill sets to make them more useful to the industries. So we have a finishing schools policy. We are very aggressive. We have a skills mission in which electronics and semiconductor is becoming a major thrust area for creating skills. And any industry who is keen to set up in some their plants or industry in Odisha, like Telangana, as I said, almost all the states are working in similar line. We also have a policy where any industry, if they want, say, 1,000 manpower, and this would spell out their requirements of quality manpower, and it's the responsibility of the state, provided the industry gives us that much of time. If they say our manpower have to be trained in this particular thing for 6 months, okay, within 6 months we'll create that manpower for the industry to consider selecting them. So we have a very aggressive skills policy. And we also have a good set of engineering and diploma colleges in the country, state. We churn out about 1 lakh plus technical manpower. So only thing is that now we are working with the engineering colleges and the universities to improve the curriculum to suit it to the industry's needs, as well as to start large number of finishing schools and mass-made skill programs. This apart, the other problem is that everybody is talking about startup. We are also coming up with a startup policy. We have started the startup policy of most of the states. The Government of India startup policy is already out, so we are also working on it, and possibly on 5th of March we will be publishing our startup policy, where we hope it will be, since we start little late, possibly our policy will have certain elements which will be better than some other states. I should not at this stage say that it will be the best policy in the country, but certainly it will be comparatively much better than many of the existing policies. So one is having the startups, but startups have a bigger problem. Recently, just few days back, we are interacting with about 400 young entrepreneurs and innovators and startup enterprises in Odisha. What we found, biggest problem the startup faces, they are bubbling with energies, they have a lot of ideas, but they don't know whether their ideas are going to make some meaning in the market. So what is required is a strong dose of mentoring, possibly is required both in terms of technology as well as in terms of business management. So there, as a country, as states, we need to support the entrepreneurs along with the industries who are already established players and academia. So this is where the state of Odisha in its startup policy is putting something that anybody who is aspiring to have a startup, apart from giving them incentives, we have a lot of incentives. In fact, we are for setting up ESTM things. Apart from MC programs of Government of India, we give additional 25% capital investment subsidy, then VAT and other exemptions, training and HR support. So all those things are there, land at a cheaper rate. Apart from that, for the startups, we also have a policy of supporting them in terms of technology as well as business mentoring. So this is a few things we have already done, and though we don't have many industries, we have 5 reasonably good players in ESTM sector in Bhubaneswar who are into chip designing and other things. We would like more of industries to come to Odisha. We can assure you one good thing, that we can assure you 365 days, 24/7 absolute quality power. We have plenty of power, good quality power infrastructure we have put up, and other things, other infrastructure, other than that we don't have a full-fledged international airport. Other than that, we have the rest of the infrastructure highly favorable, very good quality infrastructure will provide, and more importantly, comparatively cheap and very high quality power on a continuous basis we can provide. So this apart, we would like suggestions from industries and IESA to guide us, because states, the bureaucracy in the state sometimes can come up with good policies, but whatever policies they think good may not work good for the industries. So whatever policies we are coming with, we are open to getting suggestions from the industries, so that we will work still hard and make it really favorable for joining, for making Make in India campaign a success. Thank you.
Very much, Pradeep, and I think the competition between the states is one of the best things to come out of this whole program, so thank you very much. Finally, I want to invite Dr. Jayesh to share a few words. He's from Government of Kerala, representing the startup mission in the state. After his comments, we'll go to the question and answers in a couple of minutes.
Good evening, friends, and my senior colleagues on this dais, Srinivas. Yeah, I'm not pitching for Kerala per se, because the stalwarts here are much senior bureaucrats and I will not be able to match up with them. And last 2 years I've been coming here and we've made some pitches on the electronic manufacturing clusters that we're building up in Kerala. And to just tell you a quick rewind of what is happening, Keltron, which is a Kerala State Electronics Development Corporation, was a very known name in the Indian electronic circles. And suddenly after 80s, probably after mid-80s, we started going down on that. And thereafter the focus has been mostly on software, and the electronics and the hardware part has taken a backseat. Now there needs to be the whole revival of the whole thing, and that is what the entire team headed by Mr. P.H. Kurian as a IT and electronics secretary there is trying to attempt. We've been trying to attempt a few electronics manufacturing clusters under our EMC scheme. We got since Dr. Ajay Kumar also happens to be from the KEDA from Kerala, so we happened to get at least 3-4 districts of the place called as notified brownfield clusters. And we came and presented it across to the entire audience, I think, last couple of times. Yeah, response is pretty much lukewarm. We're just waiting for more people to step in. And we'd like to know what more needs to be done or what is lacking kind of stuff. So I'm basically on a probing this thing to find out, probably give a feedback to my policymakers as to what it is now. So facilities, infrastructure is what we are creating. That's one which is being done. More than the infrastructure, we spoke about the skills. There's one area that has been quite good, but from the educational qualification to the hands-on skill that is required for a manufacturing facility, there's quite a bit of difference. We have been attempting to do a bit of skilling programs in a World Bank aided project called ESAP. We have been establishing what we call as a ICT Academy, which is under the National Skills Council. A few attempts in these levels have been attempted. We have been attempting a few institutes which are basically providing skills in the ESA section also. Now, that is one area which work is happening. Now, having talked about the infrastructure and skills, these are two things, and then the policy. Yeah. So the policy part, Government of Kerala has come out with investor-friendly policy to whatever extent, probably not to the extent what Telangana on a clean slate could work on or Odisha could offer, because this is a pretty land-starved state. We will not be able to offer a huge furnished parcel of land because Kerala's the land areas are scarce. So probably that could be one of the disadvantages. But then yes, there are people who have been working out of there successfully. They have offices in Mysore, Bangalore and all. SFO Technologies have been one of the good companies to show. We have OEM and quite a few companies which have done decently well working out of the state. Now to come back to one of the areas where I work on right now is the startup part of it, the entrepreneurial attempts that has been happening. 2012 is when Kerala government started very seriously focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship, and mostly driven by ICT, and a lot of youngsters who came up as a startup and they felt that they can do much better, and they prompted the government to come up with a student entrepreneurship policy that when you do your education itself, we can look at it from an entrepreneurial way. So the state launched a student entrepreneurial policy and followed it up with a state technology startup policy, and that is what my society or that agency does. We implement that technology startup policy across the state. Now, as part of this policy, what we have done is we started going to the school level, where we started distributing Raspberry Pi and other gadgets where people can tinker and then start coming up with that hands-on experience, because you got to catch them young. At a K-12 level, we have been interacting with Intel. They have been associating with us for hackathons and Intel challenges. At college levels, we've created what we call as a boot camps, where they can start working on their entrepreneurial ideas so that you don't lose anything, you don't miss your classes, you don't lose your number of years. And taking forward from there, we have all this incubation facility that we have been building up. Yes, we had some decent good incubators coming up in the Startup Mission, which was formerly known as Technopark TBI. Then we had the Startup Village, which is a telecom incubator, which is a public-private partnership incubator. We have an incubator coming up in which is already working in NIT, Calicut. We have a few other academic incubators, and one of the recent attempts in electronics has been an electronics incubator which is being set up in Cochin with the support of DAITY and also an institute called IEEE TMK, which is Information Technology and Management. And this incubator, I think, is one thing which we are pitching very heavily to get more startups come in, be able to work around and then connect with larger ecosystems. One thing we have not been very fussy about is like who should come in. Startups from anywhere can come in, and once our startups reach a maturity, if they go for a place which they find is better for their growth, there is no restriction on them to do so, because even one of our startups have gone to the Entrepreneur Park run by IESA, and they're doing decently well, so there's no restriction. But they should not go because of a lack of facility. They can go because of an abundance or a better facility available somewhere. We are open to that. So just to give you a bird's eye view of what we do, so we are building another campus like in Cochin, which is a 13-acre campus where we are bringing in multiple sectors. And electronics today has come into almost all the sciences, like everyone is using it. It is no longer, like we said about IT some time back. When you thought that IT growth has reached some level, it went into all sectors. Now that every sector started leveraging it. Today I think almost all sectors starts leveraging electronics. So then it's going to be a facilitator for a lot more developments in other sectors. So what we are doing is we are creating multiple sectoral incubators under one umbrella, which will lead to a lot more cross-pollination is what we are expecting. And hopefully in another year and a half, year and a half, we should be able to get our ecosystem in Cochin running fully. And any further questions, I can take it as part of it.
Thank you very much. So we have another 10-12 minutes or so. I'll open up the floor for questions. But before I do that, I just have a couple of questions for our panelists, and then we'll take it to the audience. Shri Jayesh ji and Pradeep ji, you talked a lot about what your governments are doing to enable this Make in India. But from your perspective, can you share a little bit on what you would like to see from the industry? What have they been doing well? Where are the gaps? What would you like to see more from the industry? So if you can share a few ideas.
See, the Prime Minister has already given call of action for the industry to stop importing and start manufacturing in India. So just as there is a Make in India campaign, we have our own Make in Telangana campaign. And we do realize that if industry starts manufacturing in India, the competitiveness does not come to it immediately. And therefore we need to offer on behalf of the government incentives, certain benefits. And again, different states, as Pradeep mentioned, they have come out with a policy where they provide incentives. In fact, every state government provides incentives to the industry, but some states may offer this a little bit more than that, someone may offer something else more. But if you look at the totality of the package which we provide, by and large, the states are responsive to the needs of the industry. And therefore, in the same spirit, if the industry starts shifting more and more manufacturing instead of importing from, let us say, Taiwan or China to manufacturing in India, that would be a great first step to begin with. And then when I spoke about skilling, the partnership with industry is very, very important, because as industry, they have to tell us what are the skill sets, what are the new technologies they are interested in, so that we start investing in creating skilled manpower in those areas. And for entrepreneurship also, while large companies do have their own innovation centers where some interesting work is happening, but the real disruptive, cutting edge kind of work is happening through startups. So when, for example, in the state of Telangana, when we have put together our innovation policy, we have taken a decision that if the product or service of a startup which is incubating in T-Hub is of relevance to the government, we will bypass all procurement norms, and government itself will become the biggest consumer of that product or service. So the large industries must accommodate or reconcile to that there won't be any bidding, there won't be any kind of competitiveness. And just because we are encouraging startups, we will give some services, some product manufacturing opportunity directly to them. So we need to live in reconcile with these facts that startups have to be encouraged by the government, and that is how it is. So greater support for this Make in India, Make in the States programs, partnership in the skilling initiatives, and encouraging startups, creating, level playing field will not suit the startups. Startups need to be put ahead in that field. And so to reconcile to that and actually support when the government does that.
Thank you very much. Pradeep, would you like to add something?
I'll just start with it. I think Jayesh has very nicely summed what the country or the states would expect from industries. Now, at least few states are keen to walk that extra mile. We would like to see, we don't know, maybe I was telling, we have certain policies, we don't know whether those policies are suitable for the industry or a particular subsector within ESTM sector. Possibly we will be willing to look into any new suggestion that comes. That's the first thing is that let's collaborate with each other and work together to see what would be good for this country, what would be good for the state, and what would be good for the industry, etc. So joining hands together, so meeting frequently and discussing the problems of the sector and what extra is required to be done to push this make in India. That's one. Second, now Government of India has already launched that smart city campaign, and that few cities, 20 cities have been chosen in the past measure. Additionally, it will be chosen, and thankfully, Bhubaneswar has become the number one in that challenge. So in fact, the electronics and IT department in Government of Odisha as well as Bhubaneswar Municipal Corporation, we have served for last 6 months and did lot of things with industries from within the country, from outside the country, and that is how the ideas have been incorporated in our DPR, for which we could score the highest in the challenge. But so because of this collaborative approach, what we see during last 6 months, we could emerge as the winner in that campaign. So what we need, that we need a stronger collaboration with industries. We are willing to provide facilities, provide infrastructure. As I said, suppose say in case of Bhubaneswar, it's the second plant city. It is very good in terms of infrastructure, and we are willing to give 24/7 attention, high quality power. We can guarantee that in a year your power cuts may not be more than 10 to 12 seconds. That is the sort of infrastructure we are putting, and in the next 12 to 18 months it will be a unit in Bhubaneswar. That sort of infrastructure we are building with the hope that industry will come and utilize the infrastructure at market. Apart from other incentives, we have a range of incentives we are giving, Telangana and maybe few other states will give. And naturally, it is not 1 or 2 states or 1 or 2 locations which will be able to meet the entire challenge, the demand of the Make in India effort. $400 billion dollars of manufacturing. So maybe we have to think of few locations, if not 5, 10, maybe 15, 20 locations in the country where we need to develop infrastructure, come up with good implementation arrangements, and then we'll march it. So we would like industries to consider whatever places, including say Bhubaneswar in Odisha, and we are willing to work together to create skilled manpower, to create those infrastructure as is required. So only thing that industries need to come, and that sometimes industries have certain inhibition of moving out of their comfort zone in say Bangalore or Gurgaon, Noida. We would like them to think of other destinations like Odisha.
Thank you very much. I'm sure my colleagues from industry will take that invitation to be very specific and come to you. So I do have few other questions, but in the interest of time, I'll open up the questions for the audience. What I'll request for 2-3 questions, I think we have time. If you can please state your name and your organization and get to the question and let me know who you're directing the question to. We'll try to cover 2 or 3 questions in the limited time we have. Anybody? I can't see well. Ashwini, go ahead.
Okay, this is Ashwini Kumar from Applied Materials. The question is for Mr. Jayesh Ranjan. Okay, this is Ashwini from Applied Materials. The question is from Jayesh Ranjan. We hear Telangana is taking stand on photonics manufacturing and would really appreciate if you could throw some light on it.
Yeah, thank you. So when I mentioned that we are trying to promote emerging technologies, one of the most potential technology which definitely is going to take the world by storm is going to be photonics. There is enough evidence today in US to suggest that the next, we have reached the plateau of Moore's law. We have completed the cycle of Moore's law, but the next major breakthrough is likely to come through photonics. So we have created a separate SPV, a government promoted SPV, and we are engaging with lots of technology providers, investors. In fact, our CEO of the Photonics Valley Corporation is also here, and people may like to interact with him later on. So photonics is definitely a thrust for us in Telangana.
Thank you very much. I hope that project happens with lightning speed. So any other questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
I belong to the sphere of academia. I have been working in the sphere of skill development. So it is of great interest to me what is being discussed. Firstly, I feel that there is a mismatch between demand and supply, and I'm very concerned about the quality of training being provided in ITIs, because these kids come from very disadvantaged backgrounds. So specifically, if our industries can put their heads together, if they can adopt an ITI and provide the kind of inputs that are required and set up a fund for research, I feel that will really help. There is a need for collaboration, stronger collaboration between academia and industry. And secondly, I beg to differ from you, Mr. Jena, when you said we should have finishing schools. I feel that would be an expensive affair and really not required, provided we improve the quality of education and the kind of finishing, like for personality development, if that can go hand in hand, which I had been suggesting to our Karnataka government. I think that would go a big way. Thank you.
You want to answer this?
Yeah, I entirely agree with you, ma'am. What has happened, finishing school should not be a continuous process. In fact, we need to improve our academic input, make it industry ready. Once we do that, there will be no need for any finishing schools. Why we are talking of finishing schools now? There are large number of people who have completed their diplomas or degrees or ITIs and are still not useful to the industry. So for them, we need to work on specific subject area depending upon the demand of the market. And for those things, we need to put up finishing schools, maybe for the 5, 7, 10 years, till we get good quality technicians and engineers from our regular institutions.
Thank you very much. We'll take one more question and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, please.
I am Professor Prithviraj, former Director IT for Government of Puducherry, who is driving the e-governance program. This question is addressed to Jayesh, Ranjan, Secretary, Telangana. We have a National Institute of Smart Governance present in your state. And I was wondering, because we are talking about a lot of skilling opportunities, e-governance is such a big initiative which Government of India has taken up. And I believe there's a lot of academia students as well as other students as well as other individuals who have to necessarily get a lot of skilling done in the governance sector also. Any thoughts on that and anything happening from your state?
So, I would like to add a comment to what ma'am mentioned. See, since we are talking about electronic manufacturing, we are aware that the jobs in electronic manufacturing range from the very basic low end to very, very high end, unlike the software development, etc. So, the suggestion that you have made that ITIs, polytechnics, receive more support, more attention of the industry, I completely endorse that comment, because it is in industry's interest itself if good quality manpower for these low end kind of or middle end kind of jobs are made available. So in Telangana actually we have designed this framework of industries adopting ITIs, allowing the students access to their campus for practical trainings, industry representatives going to these ITIs and improving the quality of the faculty and so on and so forth. So the regular manufacturing companies like Mahindra and all are participating it in a big way. As and when we start receiving more and more electronic manufacturing, I'm sure they will also fall within this framework. But what you mentioned is absolutely correct. And NISG is of course in Hyderabad. We collaborate quite closely with them. And I do not really know whether they have on their mandate the responsibility to train students on e-governance, but there are many other areas in which we work.
Thank you very much. So we'll wrap it up now. The time's up here. So I want to thank all the panelists for their time and all their comments here. I think Dr. Prasad has to leave this evening, so he probably won't be around for long. So if you have any more questions with him, catch him soon while he's still here. But Sri Jayesh ji and Pradeep ji mentioned that they'll be here for the rest of the evening. So if you have any more questions, you can catch them during the events in the end of the day today. So thank you very much for your time, and see you next time.
Very, very engaging conversation. Two ways, I think, senior bureaucrats. President and Managing Director, Applied Materials India. And after the chair, on to the panelists. First to Shri Jayesh Ranjan, IAS Secretary of Government, Information Technology, Govt of Telangana. Of course, the applause can be more energizing. To Shri P.K. Jena,